start? We're just going to start.
I remember one of the exercises that I think you suggested, which came a little bit out of, I think some of the physical exercises that some of the scores that we suggested, and you made up this score to do with reading a text. And we were in pairs, we were reading them to each other. At first you had to just be quite, descriptive about it, just read it out as it was, and then we had to ask questions about it. And I found that incredibly challenging, to not necessarily understand the full overarching idea of the text, to be able to ask questions, and that's something that I feel has been really useful to take into my own movement practice, this idea of asking questions. And I don't really know what that is in a physical way. I mean, I guess in a way you have to be careful that you don't end up then bringing the thinking of trying to verbalize those questions. That wasn't so much what I was interested in. How could I physically ask a question, without having to make it into a particular...
Like a verbal manifestation of the question.
Yeah. So it becomes something else.
Trying to work out how it is I do what I do, even though I'm supposed to be critical and questioning everything all the time. Actually, my kind of default response when I encounter philosophy is not particularly thoughtful. That I just sort of have a way that I respond, and that doing philosophy in a totally different environment than the one that I'm used to, I think, even if the way I actually do it doesn't change, I think I kind of understand more about why I'm proceeding in that way. Yeah. So, yes.
Yeah. And perhaps that's very similar to at least how I've experienced it from the other point of view, that it's not necessarily that I'm now becoming a fantastic philosopher, but more that it has questioned how I work with methodologies, and just putting myself into a different context with different people who look at what I do and go, oh, why do you do that? Or, oh, that's funny. Do we do the writing? That's the writing.
They always write after they dance. They always write. Again, great idea. I mean, you could write after every philosophy seminar. I don't. I don't know if other people do. I don't know if other philosophers do. But again, it just seemed like they have these practices that were really interesting to explore, and it seemed like we could take something from them, learn something from them.
There's parts of my practice I found quite hard to maintain through this project. I think the thing that I tried to work out, and that I train when I try to work out how to improvise, is how to get myself, how to create an environment that I can improvise within. So I'm not gonna plan what I'm doing. I'm not going to know what I'm doing. I just need to create an environment that I can create within, which is might be external, the way the chairs are set out, not directly front on, but a bit of a kind of circular opening. Here we are all together feel. But mostly it's internal. It's something about the way, the state of mind that I try and get myself into.
Do you think there's a hierarchy?
No. I remember that being raised in one of the sessions, this idea that the point of doing something interdisciplinary was going to be that philosophy in some way was going to help to legitimize artistic practice, that we were going to let the philosophers loose on the dance, and then we'd make it rigorous, and we'd make it structured, and we'd make it critical, and that was somehow going to make it better, or I think legitimate's the right word. But I think one of the things that maybe we managed to do in being genuinely interdisciplinary is really, really hard. Because we've all got different expertise. And even though I have experience of both, trying to actually integrate them is really challenging. But I think, especially in various moments, whether it was moments in movement or moments with speaking, we managed to find a genuine reciprocity where the way in which Aaron and I wanted to approach the text maybe highlighted things for you about your practice and the way you go about things. And certainly for me, the way in which we approached the Maxine Sheets-Johnson piece in particular was really enlightening, that my default way of approaching something is to be critical and to deconstruct. And even though I think criticism is good, the idea of taking something because it's inspiring or because it's interesting or maybe even beautiful or something like that, and developing that rather than focusing on the things that you don't agree with. Do you warm up when you do philosophy?
This is something that I think I really learned from the dancers, or something that I think philosophers could really take from dancers. They always warm up. Why don't philosophers warm up? What a brilliant idea. So I tried in the exercises that I wrote for the Anscombe, when we engaged with the Anscombe text, to try to think about what would it be to have philosophy warm up. So it seems like a brilliant thing that dancers do. There are a lot of things that dancers do, a lot of practices that they do that I thought would be interesting for philosophers to think about.
What would a warm-up be, if you could, what would a warm-up example be for a philosopher?
Well, I should say that, Jade, you had mentioned this, that actually warming up by moving at the conference that we ran together was very effective. So it's not clear that actually physically warming up wouldn't be a bad idea. I thought about the way I did it in my exercise, and I'd love to get further feedback, was to just people read out loud the text. We focus on text. We work hard with text, talking them out. So I thought maybe talking the text, speaking the text would count as a warm-up.
Well, we had text that we had assigned to each other, or that we would be assigned for the day, and then we would explore that text. So we knew that the explorations would be around that particular text. Then, however, the specifics and what question the person was looking at, that was often the I think that depended on how long we had worked with that particular person, how well we knew each other, how well we knew each other as movers, and how much the person was wanting to communicate outwards. So some of it was quite internal. There were lots of very internal explorations, and some explorations were quite explicit. So I think as an improviser as well, you can be very explicit with the improvisation, and sometimes you can be quite internal and private with the improvisation. So I think it was depending on a lot of these factors, I think. So yes, sometimes absolutely, sometimes not really, but then the discussion afterwards would then reveal those internal goings on that were either quite clear or not.
words can go a really long way. So as dancers, we might take a sentence or a word, and that will do us for a week, and we can take that somewhere. And actually, starting with a really big piece of text, we can read that, we can work our way through it and discuss it. But then when it actually comes to taking that into movement, and so that the philosophy and the movement get kind of equal play, there needs to be such a tiny amount of words for me.
I think on the philosophy side of things as well, there was a desire to actually try and do some substantive philosophy, like the kind of things that you do as a philosopher, and working with a plural, because they were thematically connected. I think we were very interested in issues about knowledge and intention and the relationship, like cognition and movement and so on and so forth. So there was something very thematic going on. But wanting to actually get through a number of texts, I think, was something that I kind of liked the idea of, that we were kind of reading these things and then we were seeing what we could do with them in movement. Whereas I think if we just sort of focused on one throughout, there was something about the diversity, which obviously presented its own challenges, but was quite nice.
They took charge of constructing the score. That's an interesting thing. So improvisation, they think of improvisations in terms of scores for improvisations. And they constructed a very minimal abstract score. I think actually, I'll say this, I don't know if I've said it to you, it was initially partly the way in which you guys think in terms of very abstract scores for improvisation that made me think it would be well suited to collaborate with you. It was like a philosophical, it's like a kind of abstract, so it's this very abstract minimal score, which they sent out email. We had no real idea. There was a tiny bit of, I wouldn't say rehearsal, more like trying to figure out actually what the score was that we did beforehand.
Now that's something that if we work together more in the future, I'd like to hear more about, because to me, our scores, they're quite deliberate, and like what you mean by abstract, and this probably isn't the time to go into it, but that's a kind of interesting opening for the future by what.
Nothing is said about who will do what particular people will do what, or particular things that they will say, or where they will be. So it's very high-level description of some people. One person might ask some questions, and then some. I mean,
it's not like prescriptive for individuals, right?
I mean, I love it. I don't know. I mean, I love it. It's kind of what attracts me to the way these guys work.